All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this talk. As you can see on this slide, hardware. Actually, that didn't match the description. That's on. I'm sorry. It's. I don't even remember the name that I gave them about. It's something about Pwning IP cameras for fun and not profit. I said not profit because I'm not going to report it. I don't know how to report it. It's another country. Kind of don't care about earning money from this. I'm not going to hack cameras in order to blackmail people, you know. So it's not for profit for me, it's for fun. And I think you all should try to attempt to do this for fun. Also, it's a great way to learn about electronics. It's a great way to learn about Linux. So this is kind of a 101 level course. So who am I? Well, I'm not a dog, that's a light switch, but he's saying hello. So hello, everybody. Woof, woof. I am Francis. Man. Okay, I work for a company in Rome, New York, in central New York. I'm a software engineer, and if you look around Rome, New York, there's a lot of interesting companies around there. I have a passing interest in IoT. It's very interesting because, you know, you look at it, it's like the buzzword nowadays, IoT, and store your data in the cloud, and control your light bulbs, and control your light bulbs and your thermostat. Make sure you control your damn thermostats because they might be too cold in New York or so. You know. Okay, so yeah, I have an interest in IoT. So IoT stands for invading and owning technology. If you couldn't, you know, if you didn't know that before, that's the official definition, at least for these slides. And also, I've given a few other talks about physical security. So I talked about lockpicking at ISC2 in central New York. I talked about 3D printing to a bunch of kids and at Maker Faire, Mohawk Valley Mini Maker Faire. And also, I taught a bunch of teenagers lockpicking at Cyberpost 500 in central New York, which is really funny because you see a bunch of kids with lockpicks and they see these padlocks pop in their hands and they're like, "Are we allowed to do this, sir?" And I'm like, yes, yes, you must learn how to freaking do this. And it's just like two pieces of metal that you're popping locks. So, you know, and it's not a dance move, it's popping locks, it's a security move. So finally, my thank yous and a demo. So first, some props. I want to talk to. I want to give props to Senrio and Exhibitor. I did training with them, and they helped me put a lot of things together in terms of my because I was interested in electronics when I was a kid. I was interested in coding later on in college, and they helped me put those things together. And I was interested in security. I was red boxing as a kid. I was doing some things as a kid that may not be normal for most people, and it was a lot of fun. But now they took me into a way to think about things in terms of embedded electronics. Also, exploiteers.rs has a great wiki. They're pretty entertaining, and also. SINAC, they have some great presentations. And also, who inspired me as a kid was Gordon McComb. He had the Gadgeteers Goldmine book. That's back in the 90s and the 80s. Also, Gordon McComb, he is a prolific author of instructional books from a defunct store called Radio Shack. So if you wanted to learn about how transistors worked at a molecular level, he had little smiley faces on electrons and holes, and it's a great set of books to learn about basic analog electronics, and he also gets into digital electronics slightly. And last but not least, kind of a demo. Now, what the hell? This is like the beginning of the talk. Why is there a demo? A demo already? I mean, like, what's wrong with this talk? Oh, okay. Well, demo gods, please have mercy on this. On this, and I hope you guys don't get bored. So here I have, as you can see, this is redacted. I don't want to reveal the company name of this. There's a logo here. I don't want to reveal the company name of this particular IP camera. I think they stopped selling it at the discount store that I purchased this from. It's a nice, cheap target to attack. I was hoping to have a version package, but unfortunately, somebody already cut the tape. I don't know if they've already hacked it before I did. So we'll see how this works, because I haven't really tested it out with this one yet. And I'll get into why I say this one. So this is a regular IP camera. Oddly enough, there's a speaker on the back of it. So if you plug it in, I'm a little nervous. I'm between like crashing from my caffeine kick and getting really nervous, so I'm really shaky for some reason. But so powering it with the USB, and just wait a little bit. There's a click. La la la. I only have 50 minutes. Come on.
Please use mobile phone for Wi-Fi configuration.
Okay, so it tells you that. That's kind of interesting. So what you see here is there's also, well, there's a camera, there's a red blinking light. There's, for some reason, a micro SD card slot here. So I decided to, I'll just throw in a random SD card here. So I'll unplug this. I'll throw this in. I'm shaking. I hope this doesn't fall off somewhere because I don't have another SD card to demo this with. Okay, so this is going to take a little bit of time, but red light. It's not connected to anything, at least as far as I know. But yeah, so I put a micro SD card, and it's supposed to do something after a click. All right, enough of that. So, what happened? It was just an SD card. I just unplugged the power, put in an SD card. This could have been on the wall. Maybe like, hey, I'll plug in an SD card, and then I'll unplug it and replug it. Or there's like a pinhole in the back, reset it. So what happened? And aside from wanting to inspire you guys, who here works with Linux like exclusively or works with a lot of Linux? Great, this is good. For those of you who aren't, now is the time to learn it because it's not for using it on your desktop, although that's really cool, but it's also to learn how it's working in all of these little tiny devices. So the thing is, let's say you're in a corporation and you're the IT guy, and they say this camera is not working. What's happening? Well, you might have to do forensics, and you'll see there's a micro SD card. Well, what the hell happened? So you get to take a look at it and see what was the flow of how they did that. So you saw a normal behavior, which just said, please connect this to telephone Wi-Fi service or something. And then you saw me rickroll all of you guys. So what was in that SD card? Well, I'll reveal that later. But I want to get you to the process of how I formulated whatever was in that SD card from the beginning. So, but let's start from the beginning. What is hardware hacking? Well, there's a lot of definitions of hardware hacking. Is it embedded hardware? So is it like a microcontroller? Who here works with Arduinos? All right, good. Okay, so you'll know things like I2C, SPI, UART, that kind of stuff, debugging and just firmwares and learning all that stuff. Is it embedded Linux? This is the reason why it's kind of important to learn Linux. Is it hobbyist alterations? Well, I just put a bigger battery in this device and I hacked it. Well, there's that too. But however, no matter what you're doing, it's having fun with your hardware and making it do something else. So it's a gosh dang fun time. But today, I'm going to talk about intruding into embedded Linux. And also, I have a few points where maybe I'll ask a question or have something where Like for example, here's a question for all of you who watch YouTube channels. So who is the YouTuber who created a Teflon knife in order to remove intrusion stickers?
ABE?
Yes. Now I don't have Teflon knives, but I do have plastic razors that are used in order to cheat on Rubik's cubes. So, I'm going to be asking questions. So why am I presenting this? Because it's fun. Because you own it. You bought the hardware. So you should pwn it. Okay? So when I say, because you own it, I want to hear you all say, so I should pwn it. Okay? Because you own it! Because you own it! Oh, well, okay, that's pretty good. Also, personal security and evaluation and consideration. So before, Jeff was talking about governments and systems, and there's kind of some standards and some rules that government systems require. And maybe you might have to evaluate whether or not your facility wants to have something like this on it. And I'll get to that later. Patching. So, like, if you get into something, then hey, maybe there's like bad binary or bad script, or even just a default password. So why not change it? See if there's a default password on there. Change it. Maybe there's a service running on it that you shouldn't have on a freaking IP camera. So why not get in there and configure it to not run that service? And we'll get into that later. Humor. So maybe you just want to have a prank. Maybe there's a way you can do this and reverse it. Maybe you can have it so that the video stream is like of Barney or something. I don't know. Whatever tickles your funny bone. Feel better about myself? The fact that this is being sold in hundreds or thousands of stores, and the fact that you're better than them, it makes you feel a little better about yourself, especially if you're not employed yet. You'll be like, I effed with this thing. All right, so that's really fun too. And also, I just want to emphasize physical security. Because the thing is, you bought this thing and it's in your hands. Anybody who's done Linux and you've forgotten your password, what do you do? Single user mode, right. So once you have physical access, that's right, it's getting owned. All right, so listen, it's just like going back to going to a desktop. Because you have it right in front of you, and you can control it. You can see it, you can observe it, and you can do whatever you want. You can break it apart. You can, there's a guy here that did a decapping talk in BSides, and he showed how you can look at the silicon. It's just you have ownership over it, and you have to know that you're going to own it. So here's a process that basically you should go through. First of all, get physical with it. So take it apart, desolder things, or take it apart, take a look at it, do some background research on it, see what the numbers mean, see what the silk screens might mean, see why there's a certain number of pins that are at the headers. Part two, get inside it. So get the foot in the door. So this is generally what's usually the fun part. So this is where you basically get root in this embedded device. But that's not the main thing that you want to do. What you also want to do is part three, look at it, analyze it, have fun with it, and exploit it. So you get in, you get root, you find out the weaknesses, and then after that, you develop an exploit for it. And then part 4, freaking do it. Right? The exploit, it's just somebody like, okay, that's cool. You know, this is a stupid script. Okay, well, whatever. Just do it. You know, freaking rickroll somebody or whatever. So, observation, research. Tools you need, eyes, some screwdrivers, magnifying glass, sprudger. I mean, if this isn't like, you know, this isn't obvious already, I should just speed right through it. Curiosity in Google or DuckDuckGo, just like what Jeff said before, we have Google now, use it. And when you Google things, it's quite amazing how much can be revealed because of documentation and government standards. Unwitting target, so look for cheap IoT devices, Big Lots or Walmart, and then, you know, there's a lot of things to just basically exercise and get into the shallow end of things. And also another reason I want to give this talk is because we're getting into the early stages of IoT, as much as people want to think that this is in the mid stages. We're in the early stages, security is very poor. I want you guys to have fun right now. Okay, because back then it's like, you know, there were some other things that were really easy to hack. And now there's all the security around it. It's like, oh, I don't want to deal with the research or the reverse engineering at that level. So start with this, 30 bucks, 40 bucks, okay? And also get a sacrificial lamb. So this was not my, that's my term. Sacrificial lamb is just buy something that you're going to work on, you're going to tear apart, and then when you have a target, you test it on a complete target that you don't, you know, you're trying to not break into, you're trying not to unscrew stuff. Just make an external attack, but figure it out internally with your sacrificial lamb. Ugh. Okay, what to start off with? Well, you have a lot of IoT devices, a lot of choices. For example, why is Big Lots selling a $30 Wi-Fi outlet? That's not running Linux. I looked it up, but it is running a microcontroller that's very popular in the hobbyist circles. So if you're working with that kind of microcontroller, you probably know how to hack it. Same thing, they have a $40 wireless outlet strip. Now, Wi-Fi range extenders, those are a lot of fun too, because they're incredibly cheap, like 20 bucks, and they're most likely running Linux on some MIPS or an ARM processor. So take a shot at it. You're only out 20 bucks, hey, seriously. This one's pretty cool. Skylink M1 main console, Skylink Net Alarm Automation System. Wireless siren for indoor use, white. There's a lot of security devices, like say if you go to Harbor Freight, or Hazard Fraught as some people would call it. They have 4-channel DVRs. They're probably running Linux. They have a hard drive in them. Just take a look. Actually, I think there's a Russian web forum where all they do is intrude on DVRs for security. They will reveal all the default passwords. They'll just run John the Ripper and just decrypt the hashes. Security that's IoT or connected or really complex, just dive into it, okay? And also, this was in a drugstore. There's also Wi-Fi outlets at a drugstore. That, you know, so if you don't have a Walmart within walking distance, go to your local drugstore, see what electronics they have in the electronics section. It might be on clearance for half off, who knows, whatever. Also, there's some other things like streaming boxes, Roku boxes, Chromecast. There's a ton of Chromecast clones out there that you can get on eBay. Televisions, so, you know, go onto Facebook Marketplace and buy a broken television. If it's HDMI and high def, it's probably running even maybe the same processor as what's on this camera, and it's running Linux. Also, there's an interesting GitHub wiki for a Subaru stereo system, which I actually have in my car, and I'm kind of afraid. Look for the article, Jailbreaking Subaru Starlink. And he goes step by step, or she, I don't know, he or she goes step by step into how they got into the QNX operating system for that radio. And it's pretty cool. So what's a sacrificial lamb? Like I said, anybody recognize what movie this is from? Sneakers. All right. So they had to break into an office, and they're like, what kind of security system do they have? Well, one thing was they had a thermal body motion detector, and they had to find the weaknesses in it. So they bought the motion detection system, and they said, oh, well, you can wear this suit which hides your body heat, and you'll suffocate, but at least you won't be detected. Or what you could do is increase the temperature of the room on the thermostat to body temperature, and then afterwards you walk like, I don't know, 1 inch a second or something like that. So you have to walk really slow in order to not trip the motion detection, and it won't detect your body heat because the gradient's not extreme enough for it to trigger. Another part was that there was a door. It had an airlock on it. You swipe the card and you say a particular phrase, and it would try to match your voice to the original person who was recorded for that card. Does anybody know what that phrase was? I think you're missing something in the beginning. Oh, man. I had like these handouts, these power bracelets. If you could just. All right. I'm sorry. No power bracelet for you. But maybe I'll get you a plastic razor later. So take it apart. Learn from all the physical aspects of the device. Take it apart, look at the chips, write their numbers down so you know what the model chips they are, and you can try to look them up. Read the silk screens. So sometimes it's just really simple. It'll just say on the silk screen, JTAG, data out, data in, clock, or MS, or it'll say something like, UART TXD RXD. He'll be like, well, maybe that's a serial terminal. It probably is a serial terminal. Photograph them. Sometimes you can't see the thing, so you'll have to, you'll try to microscope it, or you'll try to magnifying glass it. Also, it's kind of weird because different angles, depending on if it's like silk screened or laser etched on the enclosure, it'll mess with how the light's reflecting off the chip. So you have to go into weird angles and have a lamp that's like in weird angles, and eventually it'll clear up and you can see the numbers. But use your phone camera, use a regular camera with a macro lens. And also search FCC or you can look at iFixit so you can get some idea of what's inside there. Before stalking them on Facebook, you can also, depending on what's being sold or what you get, you can even find papers or pinouts on eBay, DHgate, Alibaba, because they don't want to send you documentation with it. So it's like, okay, you bought this thing, here's the documentation on our advertising. If you don't download it right now, well, you're up the creek. So that's a very interesting thing, which is finding pinouts on the sales, but you can't find the pinouts at the company. Yeah, and don't stalk them on Facebook. That's another presentation. So a really fast FCC example. There's something called the Eufy Genie Smart Speaker. So you can get that on Amazon. It's Alexa compatible. It's very cheap, $30. Actually, they sold out, so now you can only buy it from secondary sellers for $30 as well. I don't know how they're making money off that. But, so here it is. There's the Eufy Genie Smart Speaker, all right? So what you do is you go site fccid.io. That's, if you know Google hacking. And you put the name there. Sometimes they have a secret code name for the product, and you have to look it up somewhere else. So you have to just keep digging, and figure it out, and eventually you might find it. But here you can see on the links, the first hit, internal photographs. So FCC will, in order to pass FCC, they have to order a company. The company has to order another company evaluate their devices for interference and things like that. So they'll have to submit a manual, they'll have to submit internal photographs. So sometimes that's pretty useful. So here's the internal photographs of that Eufy Genie speaker, antenna, whatever. So scroll down, you find this. So that's pretty interesting. There's a WinBond RAM chip on the left. Over here, and usually the pictures aren't this clear. But you can see there's a MediaTek processor. It's probably MIPS or something. And over here, there's like this really thick, 8-legged IC that they actually shaved off the name on that. It's not the resolution of the projector. And, but it's thicker than usual, which means that it's probably flash, NOR. A NOR chip, speaking SPI, maybe quad SPI. And because usually if it's a power or a level converter, it's a little bit thinner. So after that, also remember the silk screen. So you see the silk screen. LinkPlay, 831, VO4. That's pretty interesting. So let's look that up. I didn't even put fccid.io, and that pops up as the first search result to get the, the manual for the LinkPlay. The second one is the company link, and then the third one is where you can get an evaluation board. So remember what I said about sacrificial lambs. Getting an evaluation board is pretty handy without having to purchase the Eufy Genie speaker. Although apparently the evaluation board is 25 bucks, so you'll only be saving $5, whatever. Okay, so what you want is pinouts. You want your surface attack. So over here you can see there's these SD interfaces. It's probably still flash, to some sort of flash. You have power, you have I2S if you know anything with Raspberry Pis and working with retro emulators. That's the output for Raspberry Pi Zeros usually. There's the Ethernet pins. That's pretty useful. You have USB data minus data plus. That's pretty useful because if you get in, then you can DD the image of the flash and then put it in the USB drive. If it has the kernel modules for mounting USB storage. GPIOs, probably for LEDs. GPIOs, UARTXD1, UARTXD1. That's a transmit receive for the UART. UART of what? Most probably a Linux terminal session. Okay, so we have ground, we have 3.3 volt, we have GPIO, you have I2C if you want to hack this to have like an LCD screen on it or a OLED. And then you have the CPU reset. That's pretty interesting too. This is something I learned from Exhibitor, which is you can use CPU reset in order to hold your CPU in like a pre-boot mode. Because if you want to use flash ROM in order to snarf up the NOR flash, you can't have the CPU interfering with it as you're trying to talk to it. So what you do is you hold the CPU and reset, so it's not doing anything. And then after that, you use your SigRock or whatever it is to talk to that NOR flash, and then you snarf it up. And also in this document, it tells you how to debug it. UART to debug needs 57,600 baud, 81, and then there's no flow control. Very simple. So, okay. For those of you who know how to calculate it, approximately how many microseconds is the pulse for 1 bit at 57,600 baud? This is a power bracelet and some plastic razors. That way you can use a power bracelet to protect your wrist from not slitting yourself. Okay, whoever tells me, I'll leave this up here, and I'll let you guys compute that. I know somebody who can do it because he memorizes the microsecond pulses for particular baud rates. So that's not cheating, but I don't know. I want to give somebody else a chance. I'm sorry. So, I feel like, Okay, so let's go into what I purchased. So here is my redacted packaging for whatever it is that I purchased. You saw what I pulled out. And here's what I initially saw when I first took it apart. So I'm sorry for the blurriness, but yeah, that's the front, that's the back. Or actually, that's the front, that's the back. It depends on how you see opening it up. Okay, so what is on that thing? So ask yourself, is it a processor or a microcontroller? And what processor is it? What microcontroller is it? Find the data sheets. Are there any peripheral things like, is there, you saw there's flash, and there's RAM, but what else is there? Is there like a radio that's talking outside? Also, look for a UART chip, because maybe there's a USB interface on the casing where you just plug a USB cable right into that thing, and then that UART chip will immediately speak UART to the processor. And that takes a lot of weight off of your soldering and everything like that. NAND, SPI, all the flash stuff, non-volatile storage, USB contacts. Sometimes you see 4 pins. One's 5 volt, one's ground. What are the other 2? Oh. I heard some mumblings. All right. Any strange contacts? So, JTAG pin headers. I'm not going to go into JTAG, that's a whole nother talk, but if you see like 2x7, 2x10, 2x5, 2x4 sometimes, and they look like surface mount headers that they haven't been populated yet. Also, sometimes they might even say what JTAG pins they are, or you can also trace it out from the CPU or whatever JTAG target you're looking for and trace it out to those contacts. But look for possible JTAG headers, and that's where you can use JTAGulator to probe them. Buses, SPI, I2C. So let's see. Awkward copper pads and test points. So there's something called flying probes. Copper pads are used for testing after the manufacturing of the PCB, so that it can see continuity, to see whether or not it has good soldering and everything like that, see if the processors are working correctly. And the thing is, that's used for testing after development. So that's pretty interesting too. Tinned pads. So that goes into tinned pads. Sometimes the development board will become a production board. What they do is take out some of the things that will bridge the interface for testing or debugging. But it leaves some other things like that require testing with the flying probes. So they need a way to test things without those debugging chips, or basically like level shifters or something like that. Silk screening. So yeah, just read the silk screening, and you might be able to figure out. Sometimes it's really easy. And here's a picture of a flying probe tester. And basically, it's just needles poking at copper pads, and the accuracy is amazing. And that's how they test things in the non-developer mode, but in the production mode. So Google it. Or DuckDuckGo. If you're interested in privacy, use DuckDuckGo so that nobody knows you're trying to develop a link play speaker. So what are you waiting for? Just freaking Google it. All right, so let's look it up. Read the numbers, Google it on your phone, tell us what it is. I don't know if we have enough time for that. But, and then look out for pinouts. So the processor. This is an example of a bad angle for cameras and light. So when you twist it, it pops out a lot more. So over here, somebody can look up. The numbers here is, well, HI3518. Yep. So what can you tell me about high silicon? No. We don't want to target particular nationalities. We just want, we want to be cool. Be cool, man. Be cool. Do you know who owns high silicon? Yes. So remember what I said before about sometimes a particular organization will have rules about particular manufacturers. And you say, hey, this comes from an American company. But the internals, not so much. Okay, over here, there's a big letter G, 25Q, 128 CSIG. Okay, this is it's a big competitor to WinBond. It's called GigaDevice. They make a lot of, they have a lot of NOR flash for BIOS and for basically cheap electronics. So that's where the file system is going to be sitting. On top of that, you can see the Wi-Fi chip. So, and also you can see over here, there's 4 copper castellated pads. What do you guys think that might be? Okay. So it might be USB. So if you need like a storage thing and you don't have that micro SD card, maybe you just desolder that and put a thumb drive onto it. You know, it's pretty interesting. Okay, so if you look for the spec sheets, this is not the correct one. The 3518E V200 is still not released to the public, but this is one for V100. And you can see over here, in case you can't find the copper pads for receive and transmit for your serial terminal, there's UART0, RxD, UART0, TXD. You want to look for the first one. That's generally the one that they use in order to put a serial terminal for your Linux session. Also over here, you have JTAG, clock, enabled, data out, data in, TMS. All these things, sometimes, this is a ball grid array, so it's really tough to get, but sometimes on some embedded devices, on the back, they have through-hole vias for the ball grid array. So what you do is you get pogo pins and you start poking at them. Sometimes they put solder mask on them. Just sand off the solder mask and start poking at them, guessing at where the pins are for according to the pin grid mapping. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes. So silk screen and copper pads. We saw this picture before. This is the front. This is the back. Over here it says ground. Over here, if you tilt your head 90 degrees counterclockwise, and over here. All right, what do you think that refers to? Serial interface. All right. Now the thing was, I tested these, and these did not correlate to ground and receive. However, like I said, there was flying probes. These are not soldered over here, and there's these 3 tiny test points. And you can see over here, it looks like it's an unpopulated LED maybe. This is the other side of those 2 pads. So it's a nice sacrificial lamb, so I might as well just try soldering it. So anyway, you have enough information. You know the processor, you know the peripheral chips, you know what the pinouts are. Possible attack surface? Okay, foot in the door. This is where you want to get into the Linux session. So you want to have a USB serial adapter in order to get that session. I recommend Shikra. There's a ton of different types like FTDI, Prolific Technology. The odd Chinese one is called CH340, which I don't know who manufactures that. The logic analyzer. So for about 10 bucks, you can get an 8-channel analyzer. It pretends to be a Salier 8-channel analyzer. I recommend, if you're going to buy this, because you're not supporting Salier, that you use SigRock. So underneath there's a software package called SigRock and PulseView, instead of using Salier's logic, which is a very nice, well-polished logic analyzer. But SigRock is pretty good too. JTAGulator. So if you see JTAG pins and copper pads, just start probing them, or possible JTAG pins. So also probe. So you'll start soldering things. You'll start crimping headers and stuff like that. Multimeter for continuity testing, so if you have a pin on the chip, but you want to see if it breaks out to something else, like JTAGs. Optional soldering iron, third ends, inline power switch. So that's what these are. So these power, what I call power bracelets, these are inline power switches because when you have an IoT device or any other embedded device, and you're plugging into it, and then you're holding these probes, and you have to, tap your keyboard with a mouse, and you're trying to, oh, I screwed it up. Okay, well, I'll have to unplug it. Oh, it moved your device. Your probe is skipping, and it's shorting something out, and you effed it up. So what you have is you have this thing that's low friction. You just hit a button, and it turns it off. Hit it again. You turn it back on. This is a barrel jack. So we'll have. It's pretty handy. I really love these. What else? Yeah, that's cool. All right. Okay. Oh, okay. Those are pictures of things that I was talking about. That's SigRock right there. Yeah, I showed you all that stuff. Let's keep going. JTagulator, pretty awesome. Recon. All right. Figure the function of the hardware. So look at the processor, read the pinouts, maybe there's transmit receive. Find the debugging hardware, find out if there are other interfaces to exploit. Maybe UART, maybe USB, maybe JTAG. Probe it out, use your logic analyzer, use JTagulator, and exploit your way in to grab at the internals. So, let's see. Usually there's a video here, but let me. Let's see if there's a. Oops. Okay, I have it on here. Excuse me, just. Okay, so here I'm connecting to the UART. The purple and the gray wire is soldered to the RX, to the suspected RxDX, and that's my 8-channel analyzer. So then I go ahead and while I'm holding it to stabilize it for the camera, there's my turn on switch. I think, no, that's just a header thing. Anyway, so keep going. There's my turn on switch. Move it over. Start up SigRock. And over here, this is where I'll show you how to calculate if you don't want to do autobaud. How to figure out the baud rate of your serial. So I turn it on, start recording, a few seconds. It'll probably spout out something about U-boot and things like that. Then stop it, zoom out, find the pulses, go in, there's the pulses. Those are probably like new lines and character turns. That. And this is me trying to use a mouse. I'm kind of a little derpy with the mouse. You'll see it right here. I'm very derpy with the mouse because I'm trying to move that flag onto that line and I can't quite hit it. That's why I rather write code than do Photoshop. Okay, so you have those two timestamps, and then you go into your calculator, and then you subtract them, find the time difference. Okay, this is for 115/200, I think, but we'll see how close it gets. So I find out that pulse width is 8.5 microseconds. So what you do is you invert it. You find frequency. And it's 117,647. So there's some very common baud rates in the industry or in the world. If you work with modems, 1200, 14.4, 28.8. For things like this, and if you do Arduino, 9600 and 115.2 is very common. It's like you want the slowest rate of text possible or the fastest you can get from an Arduino. This is closer to the standard of 115.2. Sometimes some embedded devices, they have off bauds, but This is probably not an off baud. So what you do is you put a decoder, and then it'll decode it. So then after that, you'll start seeing text. So you go forward, and it says S, Y, S, T, E, M, system started. So that's how you get the baud rate for that. After that, you connect to your serial terminal session. And basically, you just connect your UART and you get a serial terminal session. And you set up the baud rate correctly. Okay, so log in, oh, there it is. Ah, dang it, I was like futzing around with that. Okay, so yeah, basically I closed it, I got the UART, and then I hooked it up and got that working. So hack all the things. So you want to read through the boot log, see what's weird, see if there's anything that interrupts U-boot, say that anything there's like a fail-safe. And also, if you get into JTAG of it, then you see where memory offsets are, because that's kind of a little important in order to start getting like single user mode session. And see what other weird things happen. So common entry vectors. Okay, this is the meat of it. Single user mode. So you want to have it do one or say single at the end of your kernel parameters. Init parameter. You might want to say, hey, init equals /bin/bash. So what it'll do is instead of running regular sysinit init, it'll run a bash shell session. Hidden parameters. I found some hidden parameters. Failsafes. I'll talk about it there. Failsafes are bugging, interrupting boot during Linux booting, like the failsafes, backdoors for authentication. So just Google for those. Flash chip glitching. So that's when you ground out the data out pin in order to cause an error, and then it'll drop you into maybe, if it's not done correctly, it'll drop you into some sort of session, whether it's a U-boot session or like an actual Linux session, user line session. Updating mechanisms. So you find the firmware online somewhere and you alter it, and then after that figure out how it gets in there. And also, if you're desperate, desolder the flash and just snarf it, and then figure it out through there. So, anybody know what this video is? Yes, war games. So there's a guy who says, "I can't believe it, Jim. That girl's standing over there, and you're telling her about our back door." What does he respond? So here I'm going to show you, and I know I have very few minutes left, and if you want to talk with me later, I definitely would love to talk to you and give the rest of us. But here I show basically how to ground out the flash chip. So over here you find out the JDEC typical NOR flash 8 pins, what the layouts are. Here's ground. Here's what's called SO, slave out. Usually it's called master in slave out, MISO. Over here is SI, slave in, master out, slave in. So what you want is this chip, which is a slave, out, and you want to ground it out so that it just sends out zeros. Or it depends on how the SPI speaks, but it'll send out a stream of either ones or zeros. It'll error out the file read, and it'll cause a crash. And if it's not handled correctly, then it's a bad thing. So over here, I mess up and I mess up the timing. So this is where I have to use the switch. Yeah, this is too late. So I have to use a switch in order to turn it back off and on again. And meanwhile I'm holding my camera and the IP cam and the USB camera and all this other stuff, and I just have to hit a switch. So it's scrolling and blah blah blah, bad. Reset. starting, U-boot, uncompressing Linux, starting to go into to the kernel side. So you want to hit either U-boot or init. So right there. Woo! Oh, what the hell? Get those two drivers! Ah! And then boom! What's this? Well, it doesn't have in mind. But that's another section. And you'll see later on that it only runs root. You know, there's kind of a weird thing where you have web servers. Do you run Apache as root? Okay, so why would you run some of these things with only root? and it is, you know, it's easier. But it's not secure. So now that you've gotten a foot in the door, this is where you start analyzing. So look at the file system. Let the OS show you the files. Yes, more memes. So what to look for? Oh, well, that kind of jumped really fast, but let's go back to this. Okay, well, if I can read it correctly, there's an init script, so runtime level stuff, see what it calls and where it goes. So you just follow the boot order. See where all the start scripts go, the RCS script, init tab, see all the stuff that's setting up along the way. Look at the firmware updating procedures, so you see if there's any scripts, Python scripts or whatever, that shows you how to update the firmware and what kind of authentication it tries to use, maybe if it does ever at all. Look at what it accesses, internet, IP addresses, any access points. Sometimes you see hard-coded SSIDs and keys. That's pretty interesting. Main program that gets kicked off, so there's a binary program. And that's why I have this picture that kind of animated on top of my text. Anybody know what that's related to? That's a recent release? Yeah, Ghidra. That's free, so you don't have to pay thousands of dollars for freaking IDO Pro. And you get to see animated dragons. So what did I encounter on the IP camera? Follow the init. I saw all this stuff on init tab. So it spawns a root terminal on the serial and sets up restart, shut down, alt, control, delete, what to do. And it sets up telnet D. When's the last time you saw telnet D? RCS. Mount file systems displays a banner, blah, blah, blah. You know, it's some things. Partition 2 on the chip, and it mounts it to home. Okay, that's weird. And then what is that? What's start.h, start.sh, and why is it not an init script? So let's look at start.sh. And also, at the end of it, there's something called P2P cam that runs last. So let's look at start.sh, and you probably can't see this. Over here, it's just decompressing stuff, load kernel modules, and then it goes into board.custom script. This is where you start looking at the power on scripts, and you try to follow and see what it's doing. Okay, so function, figuring out some ID numbers, setting up audio, setting up Wi-Fi. Meh. Okay, what else? Going back to this, check upgrade. That's pretty interesting. Check upgrade. What can I find out from that? Function, trans flash card, the micro SD card. Mounting it and run something called SDC tool. I didn't have time to mess with that. And also it has all this like commented out shell code, like this commented out code for board shell. It's like, okay, so the thing is you can see old versions of firmware updates on some of these things. They just leave it in there. And you get to see the mentality of like older, vulnerable, or broken ways of how they try to update the firmware. So it goes back, and then after that, so you remove the kernel module folders and blah, 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 do some Wi-Fi parameters. And over here, this is cool because you can't see it in low resolution. So I'm going to reveal to you what that shows. Check SD card, check blank. Firmware test. Firmware test. Okay, what you want to look for is debugging or test mechanisms. Find the SD card. Mount, make the directory for the mount point for your SD card, and then mount the first partition if it exists. And also it goes through and looks for 4 different partitions on your SD card. It made partitions on your SD cards for some reason. And then after that, it checks if this directory exists, and then it says, run factory test demo. I'm not a factory. Why am I running a demo code off an SD card? Okay, then after that, it says go into that directory and run test.sh using Bourne shell. It doesn't even ask if it's like ext2 to see if it's an executable file. It just immediately runs Bourne shell against that shell. So it doesn't matter if it's fat or whatever. Otherwise, run p2pcam. And also, at this level, if this all fails out in the partitions and everything, then it'll run p2pcam as well. However, there's a check that it's not doing, which is also very interesting. And it's going to be running into overtime. So if you guys are going to sacrifice lunch, I'd like to show you, or I can show you outside, like a BOF kind of thing. But write and run the exploit. Just freaking do it. Don't let your dreams be dreams. If you dream about rickrolling people that have an IP camera, this is your opportunity to do it. So what's in my script? Very simple. Variable. This is me saying you're hacked. Okay, so over here, it checks if there's a symlink. It sees if the rickroll version of the symlink goes to my SD card and looks at hack.wave. And it deletes the symlink. This is so that every other time you run it, it'll play the rickroll, and then every other time, in between those, it'll play the normal. So I can, I can change it to rickrolling, and then after that, if I'm tired of hearing rickrolling, then I reboot it again. It'll turn back to, please connect to your Wi-Fi phone app, blah, 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 blah. So this will reset it back to normal. Otherwise, if it's a normal, please reset your phone and blah, 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 to application setup, blah, blah, blah. It'll create the symlink to your SD card called hack.wave. And after that, I run p2pcam, which automatically plays that wave file. So in conclusion, wrap it up, observe and research, get the foot in the door. Exploit sacrificial lambs and go wild. Analyze the internals, look for debuggers. Look for funny they won't ever see that scripts. I mean, this is what they expect out of selling you a product. That there is a black box that you can't look into. You own it? You own it? You own it! You own it! You own it! All right! Yeah! All right. Analyze internals, look for debuggers, look for bad parsers. I'm going to get into that because that previous script didn't check something, which adds to another exploit, kind of at the serial terminal. Static analysis of binaries. Exploit it externally, and just do it. So go forth and hack. Hack devices, hack the freaking planet, and also if you need some cardio, hack some firewood. So here are some resources and links. If you ever see any of these cheap blank, chips, there's a GitHub for the development things. Exploiteers Wiki, Senrio, if you wanted to get the Shikra or whatever. I'm not going to sell you anything. We're not supposed to sell you anything. I won't make any money off it anyway. Equipment, so targets, UART stuff, logic analyzers. All those websites will have it. And also go see and play around with SigRock and get familiar with it. So thank you, BSides Rochester. Thank you very much. And for you guys, the audience, thank you for attending. Use your knowledge for good, not evil. Unless if it's a prank. Pranks are fun when deliciously evil. Please don't profit from this. Or not too, maybe a little bit of profit. I'm not your mom. Don't be a dick. Think twice when you buy used and audit your stuff. And forensics. Any questions? And bonus slides, in case anybody is interested. Huh? I won't be a dick.